Hello ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 9, Episode 3, Rude, Red, and Royal. But before we get started, please make sure you watch this episode first on Crunchyroll to support the show and the fantastic people behind it. And as ever, spoilers are ahead, so be cautious. And once more, we take a brief pit stop into the fandom corner for some neat art and comments that you guys left me in the last review, such as Matt Ball, who reckons that there might be more to that follow your heart advice that Blake gave to Yang, which ain't a bad shout at all. Same with the Disney lover, who ponders if Little could be Alex. Certainly a possibility. And then with FFKH92, I see you, and I understood your reference. Now, is it just me, or is it kinda weird that we're already 3 episodes into this volume after waiting so long for it, and we're already 2 episodes away now from the halfway point? Nevertheless, after a rowdy and emotional time last chapter, we're heading into this latest episode about to meet another of this world's colourful characters in its royal, just as the girls could use a mood lift. But in this birthday party featured portion of the tale, was it a very merry one, or was it not worth the celebration? Let's talk about it. We open with our leading ladies, plus Little of course, being led to the Crimson Castle, with some doubts already stewing inside them about whether or not this is a good idea. But RWBY, who's still rather sour following last episode, is also still more willing to trust following the roadmap of events that Alex experienced more so than trusting her own judgment, so they keep on track. All the while, not far away, is a mysterious blue butterfly that the show really wants us to pay attention to across this episode. Sure, it's not going to be the first time that we've seen a poignant butterfly in this series, much less a blue one, but the colour scheme is certainly meant to echo Alex, though why and how, I'm not quite sure. It's possible this is Alex herself, somehow scouting out the new humans in the book, or if we're going under the notion that Alex did indeed leave this world, like in the fable, this could be a butterfly effect maybe of sorts, like in terms of being a lingering element of her impact on this world that is now drawn to the new girls that are acting as this world's protagonists once more. Anyway, speaking of little things, and this time I'm not talking about mice, the girls finally arrive at the castle to be introduced to the birthday boy of this occasion, the Red Prince, voiced by Michael Marconian, who has previously voiced the Geo Yaksha in Genshin Impact, Niru in AFK Arena, and he's also the current voice of Caboose in Rooster Teeth's Red vs. Blue series. And yes, I said Red Prince, not Red King, as we and the girls were meant to believe. Nope, it turns out the king isn't here. Instead, the four have to deal with a bratty, egotistical, and snobbish young puppet princeling with a short fuse as large as he is diminutive. Says enough that it makes even Weiss feel some offhand shame thinking back to her own pompous noble days earlier on in the series. You think that's bad, Weiss? Trust me, you'd have nightmares about your attitude if things went a little differently in your past. Still, the lack of the Red King is quite interesting. It's the second time now that something established in the Fable story isn't the same in this world after Jinxie was described as older than expected. So clearly there's a sense that time has moved forward in this world from the point that Alex was involved, which I'll discuss a bit more on later on. It's also noted that the king's absence is thanks to humans like Team RWBY, though the soldier's wording makes it hard to tell if he's missing, he's left to go somewhere else, or the king's actually dead. You'd think if it would be the latter, the prince would be a bit more upset about having his deceased dad brought up instead of just being peeved that he was incorrectly called the king. So I'm willing to bet the king is just missing, unless this guy is so far up his own puppeted posterior that his dad's death isn't worth the misery compared to his birthday being ruined, in which case, yikes. But for as paranoid and selfish as the Red Prince is, they do make it clear early on that he's still not one you want to tick off, as he callously kicks away Penny's sword simply because it's green, and has the 2 soldiers that were gifting it to him get beheaded in a rather grim moment despite the cartoony nature of 2 wooden men losing their heads. It's played up seriously, which I am glad to see. For as absurd as this place is, it is still key that the cast and the viewer feel this place is dangerous, to escalate the drive to see them all get home safely. And it also leads to some charming stuff like this, where all the girls give their own birthday greetings to the prince in different ways that all put a smile on my face, Weiss being the best of course. And there's also some clever quick thinking on Ruby's part. Instead of letting herself be swamped up by misery over losing Penny's sword, at least for the moment, she keeps focus on the situation at hand to avoid a similar sharp-ended fate, which is a promising sign that Ruby's not yet at the point that she'll lose herself to negative emotions. She'll try her best to keep her head in the game regardless of how she's actually feeling, which definitely has its benefit, but as I've described in the past, this is also going to be more misery that she's bottling up, and at this point, I'm just waiting for that moment where that shaken up champagne bottle of her feelings is gonna come and explode. But yes, Ruby realizes that it's best to try on the prince's good side, knowing much like Alex with the king, he's their best ticket right now to get into the tree. So she requests to lift the prince's mood by playing a little game, leading us to this amazing sequence into the castle as we follow the blue butterfly down this beautifully lavish bell tower, right into the castle's game room. It is quite the eye-catching visual, one of many in fact in this episode. And while it might not mean all that much, it's really just a transition from one scene to another, it does do a lot in continuing the deep dive into how unique this place is compared to the world styles that we've seen in Remnant. Plus, I love that the game room has all these rather disorienting spiral staircases, beams, and a checkered room pattern with dim lighting, bringing some of the shadows into the room, like the royals are trying to confuse and unsettle their opponents before you even step up to the game table. Just some excellent set design, camera work, and animation from all involved across this episode. If you wanted a clear example of why this volume took so long, well, here you go. A cute moment with Little once again warming their way into our hearts later, and the prince then asks, what is the catch? What does Ruby and the others want for this game? And when he hears that it's aiding to get them to the tree, he's not all that amused. Definitely your typical lazy, stuck-up prince, but again, that troublesome side comes up when he wagers that support upon Ruby needing to win in what's basically magic chess. Most pieces to the other side wins, pieces can only move 1 space per turn, your rather run-of-the-mill special chess rules that admittedly doesn't really matter too much, since it's not long until the rules actually go out of the window anyway, which is a bit of a shame, but as I'm sure most of you will know by now, it's not exactly something worth thinking about in terms of what we actually do get. The important thing though, is the pieces are alive, and they will literally fight for victory, with the prince's pawns looking mighty tough, while Ruby's look like Fall Guy beans who have been through too many game sessions. There's also some missing pieces, which leads to Weiss, Blake, and Yang getting magically turned into little-sized replacements. Hey look, Ruby Chibi's back! And in another little detail that I love, nice touch of having each girl land in rather fitting ways. Weiss sits down gracefully with her dress fanned out, Blake lands like a cat on all fours, and Yang just eats shit, dropping right onto her ass but still having enough energy to throw up a good old thumbs up. I'm always a sucker for those cool little character quirks in terms of the animations, as well as scene transitions like this where we go from this wide angle shot of the room to a pitch black spotlit moment of them just sitting down onto the table and getting ready for the battle. As you would imagine, Ruby is immediately concerned about the fate of her friends, and I can understand why. She's currently got a small crisis of self-faith going on with her confidence as a leader, and now she's being thrusted right back into being a leader with her friends' lives on the line, and this is not exactly something that she's comfortable with right now. It's a nice way then to make this more than just a battle of wits to earn directions. It's a new test of character for RWBY, just as the scars still remain fresh. And yet she's not exactly ready to throw in the towel just yet. So it's time to dish out some chess-based battle strats, with RWBY's first move going about as well as you would expect, an early pawn loss. Not helped by the fact that the prince is kind of influencing the pieces to take an easy out rather than fight on, and more soon follow. Looks like these guys could use a bit of hope and some examples of how to, actually win a fight. And that means it's up for the girls next. Weiss showing off some fine swordplay, Yang taking one piece down before doing even more damage to us watching with that killer smirk, and Blade pulls out the ninja vanish, earning herself some praise from her other half. Very fun, very cute, and very effective in rallying up morale in not just the other pieces, but RWBY too. At least in terms that she feels confident enough to now spur on a rejuvenated chess piece to actually take down a pawn. And I like this. It shows that it's possible that RWBY can indeed reroute her emotions and self-faith's downward spiral this early on with some welcome positive upturns, regardless of how small they actually are in the moment. Sometimes a little glimmer of hope can make a big impact, as RWBY herself has proven to others way before, so it's welcome to see that put into practice here for her benefit. This is also effective in pissing off the prince, who through the game is also asking RWBY questions like why they want to go to the tree, and why they think going there will get them home, referring of course to Alex, which all comes to a head when the prince loses his, going full drama queen the closer it looks like he's about to lose, before asking what exactly are the girls. It's a bit of an odd moment then that RWBY makes a note of Blake being a faunus while the rest are human, because I know that's something that's actual terminology for the two races, but it still feels a little weird to make that distinction when in the end they are still technically human, but that's more an issue that's lasted throughout the series with how humans is being used as the collective term and a separate race term. And overall it's not a major issue, just a point of confusion in this brief moment. But yeah, RWBY drops the ball that she and the others, bar Little of course, are humans, which not only causes an immediate stir of confusion and caution in all of the pieces and the prince, who gets the mother of all split-in headaches, but it also attracts the attention of a rather curious onlooker. For now though, the prince is irate, calling out his opponent as a cheater simply because he now knows that they're humans. A bit cheap coming from him, forcing the whites to concede without much of a fight, but it's clearly meant to reflect on what happened with the king and Alex, with her apparently beating the royal at his own cheating game. And now all pretense of playing the game fairly is lost, as he calls for all the pieces, including the white ones, to take out Weiss, Blake and Yang. Maybe in the future that it will be best for RWBY and others to try and avoid mentioning that they're humans in future moments like this, as this is the kind of response they're likely going to be getting a lot if they're following Alex's steps to the letter. And out of this, we get a really damn fun fight scene, complete with a new song by Casey and Company called Checkmate. A proper bop for sure, with its mixture of jazz and electro bass, or as Martin put it, electro swing, funky, avant-garde EDM. It's funnily fitting that given the notable voice actor who makes an appearance later on, because this kind of has that same kinetic energy that I got from the Persona 5 music, with the way its bassy notes add some suspense to the scene alongside the lively energy fitting for a stylish smackdown given from the jazz music. And that's certainly what we get here. A fast-paced, visually pleasing, massive melee that showed off all the girls in top quality form, whilst making the most of the scale of the set piece itself to great effect. Like a lot of the many OG era fights that like to play with its space, the unique elements involved, and that satisfying thrill of seeing the girls just tear through large amounts of enemies. And we see a ton of classic moves involved as well, from Weiss just tearing up the place with some trademark light on her feet fancy fencing, the good old Bumblebee whip, and even more recent tricks like Yang's sticky bombs. But it's not a total wash. The numbers game does get too much at one point, not helped by little issues like Yang getting pinned down and Blake having less ammo than she thought. A cool detail there, since she obviously didn't know Weiss fired some shots herself back at the central location, though I doubt she's out of dust for good. She probably still has some on her person, it's just now is not exactly the best time for her to need a reload. Things don't look good, and Ruby's starting to lose hope, though to anyone asking, well, why doesn't she just smash down the table with her big hands? Yeah, that would help in terms of winning the fight, but not in terms of winning the game, and right now, even with things going out of whack, they do still need to win in order to get perhaps the only means of aid they can get right now in terms of reaching the tree. So I can excuse why Ruby doesn't just flip the table and get the victory there, because of what is actually needed at the moment. And it does lead to a moment where it looks like Ruby is about to give up, where she's panicking and losing focus. But she does will herself to keep going, calling out for her team to not give up and kick their wooden butts. I won't lie, I would have loved it if she said ass there, but it's cool. I think we're all clearly saving the big swear moment for when Weiss drops the F-bomb. But all serious, no, this small but very meaningful moment for Ruby's character arc is very welcome indeed. It wasn't that long ago that her plans in Atlas and the central location did not go as planned, and it left Ruby recently with some major self-doubt issues, as I noted before, with deciding to just trust in Alex instead of her own judgment. And Ruby's also noted for losing a lot of hope that she used to have, as we saw back with the Jinxie altercation. So at the moment, Ruby's strongest traits as a leader and as a source of inspiration through tough times are on the ropes. But in seeing her overcome this brief moment of doubt and panic backed by the self-confidence she got from earlier in the game, it shows that while Ruby is knocked down, she's still got enough spirit burning bright inside her to keep going, and she can make that recovery on her own. It's a rewarding moment right now, but it's also bound to have an even bigger impact later on in the volume, as a contrast to when Ruby does lose herself to her self-doubts, among other negative emotions, and she can no longer look to her own hopeful spirit to keep herself from falling deeper into despair. That's the vibe I get from moments like this, where it's clear the RWBY are really trying to craft a strong arc for Ruby, testing her will through every encounter she'll have to face until that breaking point. On top of this, making for a cool moment where fortune does turn in the hero's favor right when it's needing to, so big props there. And it does indeed to the moment where the girls get their second win, thanks to Ruby still showing faith in them, leading to some of the coolest sequences in all of RWBY fight scenes, not just this one tussle, starting with easily one of the best single shots in Weiss's history, looking like a magical winged warrior goddess as she calls upon what has to be the Nevermore from the Players and Pieces fight to rain down feathers from above. Jeez, Weiss fans are really eating well this volume, that's for sure. Yang's also freed thanks to some clever upside down slicing from Blake via Weiss's glyphs, and this helps lead to one of my personal favourite moments of the entire volume already, this awesome moment where again there's some more Players and Piece elements references being shown off with the return of the RWBY slingshot. Except this time, it's Yang going full Dragon Slayer mode, mixing her blazing brute strength and the slingshot's momentum with Weiss's armored knight sword to come down hard, wiping out every piece on the board in explosive fashion. Simply hardcore awesomeness right there, and a perfect way to cap off one of the most entertaining fight scenes in recent memory. Hats off to all around who all brought this action to life in amazing ways, from the camera work and the animation to just the general flow and creative spark to it. Seriously, this could be a high contender amongst the very best of the post-Monty era. I'm not even kidding. Sadly, the prince is a sore loser, and if not for some quick reflexes from Ruby and Little, the girls would have been flung over the edge of the game room. Despite cheating in his own right, the prince is having none of the agreed upon deal, and is about to call on the girls for their beheading, if not for the full appearance of the curious onlooker. And I do mean curious, because entering the story at long last is Ever After's own spin on the Wonderland staple perplexing pussycat, the Curious Cat. And he's voiced by the super talented Robbie Daymond, known for many roles including Goro Akechi from Persona 5, Chai from Hi-Fi Rush, and Hubert von Vestra from Fire Emblem Three Houses and Three Hopes. And right away, I gotta praise the folks behind the cat's design. The colours are so vibrant and yet perfect for a mysterious entity like them, especially with the lack of an outline to the model compared to everyone else, even amongst Ever After residents. Not to mention the incorporeal, mysterious, broken way that it appears in the scene and manipulates its body, like moving checkered shapes, forming and changing into the shape of an eye-catchingly eccentric cat that is as free-flowing as you would expect for a spirited being that still has the mannerisms of a cat. Its appearance is well timed, of course, as it managed to dissuade the prince from ordering the girls getting their heads chopped off by playing to the prince's need of fulfilling its role, winning at all costs, which it wasn't able to do here. And to better let that chance come again, it's best to let the humans leave for a potential rematch rather than lose perhaps the only people left who could challenge the prince. That's the vibe that I get, at least from this scene. That the cat is very aware the prince has to play the role of a cunning royal who the hero of the story has to outwit by playing at their own cheating game, as foretold in the fable. And I guess since every other creature in the Ever After has their established role that keeps them away from challenging the prince, it's only humans like Alex or Team RWBY who can play that protagonist role and match wits so the story can continue. It's fascinating then that the cat knows this and plays up that role aspect like it's fully aware he and the rest of the Ever After inhabitants are characters in a fairy tale, which isn't that shocking really as well. Characters like the Cheshire Cat do tend to act like they are deep and knowing figures who both act in accordance with the story they're a part of and also act beyond it. The only question then is, to what end? What exactly is it that's influencing Curious to get involved beyond just its role in the story as the next guiding figure of the hero's journey? Also, small thing, I do love the small detail that adds to the prince trying desperately to fulfill that role tasked to him because of the absence of the king, that he's constantly having to adjust his crown. A symbolic little quirk that highlights the prince not really living up to the established role that his father was known for, and he's doing his best but he is still failing, and it nearly causes him to make a decision with possible massive negative consequences if the royal in this tale isn't supposed to be able to nearly get the heroes killed in response to losing, thus the need for Curious to cut in and reroute things back on course. Not sure what can be said about him crying pearls though, but I also like that it makes Curious play with one like a typical cat would. But yeah, the girls aren't about to lose their heads, but there's still a small problem. Literally. But the prince is in no mood to want to help Weiss, Blake and Yang return to normal size, so for now it's time for them to book it, before the prince's orders go from enforced banishment to once more craving a little head trimming, leading us to another visual delight with this wild chase through the castle's many twisted corridors and doorways, very much harkening to the classic mind-bending style of MC Escher for this wicked, weird set piece, once more showcasing this world's strangeness in ways that cater to some really fun scenes. Eventually, the cat leads Ruby and Co to a hidden passage where the feline's continued mysterious side comes to light, quite literally, as it goes from being overly excited with curiosity that the girls know of the Red King to then saying, "Times change, you know, and so do we when it's our time to change," before seemingly calling forth some sort of power that causes a light to blast them all back outside. This gives the girls some time to process things and start to believe that this world is almost like that of a sequel to the original tale, with how time has moved forward. But I wonder if that is really the case, that this world is able to progress forward in time like a normal world would, or if it's meant to remain in a sort of static pocket of time. The mice never left home until Little did. time has passed where Jinxie is older and yet still able to pull off shady deals in a place that should know about his schemes if the magic was revealed via Alex, leading to that big fight. And now we have a king who should still be here but isn't, and a prince who is now taking up his role despite not being fit for it yet. I really do wonder if something Alex did, or perhaps is still doing, has caused this world to evolve, change parts of its tale, and in a sense, continue the story like a sequel would. And if so, why? Because maybe Alex rejects the change that she went through, and this caused a whiplash on the world to where it had to change to keep telling a new version of the tale until she, or whoever the current protagonist is, learns its lesson? That might also explain once more why we are getting Curious come into play right now, with its role in its world being as a guide, and its possible understanding as well of Ever After being parts of a fictional story, so much so that it seems to have an understanding of the fable's core theme, change. With its curious questioning, the guidance it will provide people like Alex or Team RWBY, and its mysterious monologues pretty much centered on the topic of change, I get the sense that the cat is here to continue the dialogue that the story is originally trying to tell. That change is necessary. It's best to follow in that course of action by changing much like time grows older, rather than running from it, something which will obviously relate back to our heroes having changed through their past experiences over time, and especially in the case of RWBY, who keeps trying to avoid any changes that would affect her on a personal level, and she keeps bottling up her misery, fear, and doubts, stagnating her growth by refusing to use such pains as inspiration for maturity and rather than a crutch. So now we have a new guide who I think will stay with the group all the way through the end of the volume, whose sole drive will be to keep leading the girls not just towards their goal of returning home, but also to the goal of their current arcs, understanding and truly accepting changes. And it's also interesting as well that he mentions other humans when asking what exactly RWBY is, so that implies that the cat has met more than just Alex. Could it be Jean, since later on in the episode we see proof that time is working so differently where the order of those who fell doesn't exactly equate to those who arrived first in Ever After? Or could it be Ozpin? I do reckon that he's been here as well for his own journey of self-accepting change, and perhaps after his meeting with the seasonal maidens that could have been the case, where he needed to reaffirm who he is after a life of solitude. Either way, in the moment I am loving the interactions that we're already getting from Curious bouncing off the cast, and he's also become another fascinating mystery to ponder on before we've even scratched the surface of who he truly is. But there's also one other thing to note. As the guys run off, they don't double back to try and get Penny's sword, and we do know from the trailer that is going to happen at some point, so I imagine that will happen maybe next episode. Or maybe someone else has already picked up the sword and they give it back to RWBY later on. Maybe the blacksmith? But again, as the girls chase off the scampering cat, we then shift over to another Ever After oddity, the Jabberwalker, as it runs from the beach acre to a far more darker setting. This bridge though is super interesting to me, not just for the cool feature of having elements from the other side mirror on the opposite end, but also it's another shot that we've seen in this volume where the core colours of the God Brothers, gold and purple, are used. The previous instance was this moment in the intro where we saw the blacksmith and caterpillar characters coloured in these same shades, and now we have this example making me feel like this can't be a coincidence. After all, this place is also having some loose ties back to the gods since we got here via the relics, items made by them. And they of course also made remnants, so what is exactly stopping them from making this alternate world? As such, I wouldn't be shocked if we get more on the two deities in some fashion, either learning more about their nature, why exactly they would create the Ever After, or maybe just learning more about this perhaps being their home world, and maybe also what they did after they left Remnant behind. As for the Jabberwalker, it's got a new interesting element to it as well, the fact that we see it bleed thanks to some really sharp grass. So it's definitely not a new type of grim, and the fact that we see the scene actually focus on this makes me feel a little bit more confident that we'll find out it is indeed something that used to be human. It also grabs onto something that I can't quite make out, as it says, fix. Fix what exactly? Could it be wanting to repair this ruined acre to what it used to be, since it looks like the wasteland of a destroyed city? Or could it be something to do with the blacksmith, who is covered in various bits and pieces, so maybe somehow the Jabberwalker is used to hunt down some of these parts so it can use for its new body. Its hunting is distracted though by the impact of a pink comet, bringing the arrival of Neo. Again, more weird time stuff is going on here if Neo is only just now landing in this place. But more importantly, she is pissed. Her face is a look of pure rage, and with her churning into Ruby and Cinder, it's obvious where their rage is directed at, the two people that Neo is currently blaming right now for her current fate. She's definitely going to be the wildcard thread of this volume, wanting to enact revenge on RWBY. But I do hope that we will see Ever After's motif of trying to make human adventurers experience growth test Neo with realizing the error of her lust for revenge. Like the intro song says, vengeance is a riptide, and there's every chance that Neo's life could get washed away the more she lets this strong hate fuel her drive and let it sweep over her. For now though, she finds herself a good outlet to vent her frustrations on, as the Jabberwalker comes in for a closer look. A bad call in the end, as suddenly Neo's semblance kicks it up a notch, summoning multiple copies of herself, which is a surprise even to Neo, as it seems she didn't do this willingly. The most likely answer being a combo of her currently high emotional state and the magical world that she's now in responding to her power, much like it reacted to RWBY's high emotions with the weather. This seems supported as well by the visuals, since the power flows from Neo into the ground where the copies then sprout from. But here's the thing. While at first you may think this is a semblance evolution, much like when Ren's semblance evolved from an emotional dampener to an emotional analyzer, I don't believe that's the case, since Neo has actually made whole new copies of herself before, as told in RWBY Roman Holiday, the story of Neo's past. As a kid, Neo, or Trivia Vanille as she used to be known as, had her semblance manifest an imaginary friend of sorts, which she called Neo. Her semblance created a friend because Trivia's rather horrid sheltered childhood caused her strong emotional pains that the power was able to use to create a separate version of Trivia that, in time, would act independently, come into contact with others, and ultimately end up being the embodiment of the kind of person that Trivia wanted to be. Free, with nothing suppressing of what she wanted to become, and thus she took up Neo's look and name as her own in the future. This is very much in line with what we see here, Neo's emotions converging with the increased emotional effects that Ever After can spark to create such large effects like this. Because right now, Neo has had enough of everyone. Her vitriol for RWBY and her anger at being backstabbed by Cinder has now led to Neo unwillingly gaining the ability to create multiple copies of the only person right now she can trust, herself. And it doesn't take long for Neo to realize the implications of this, and the benefits too, as she orders the other selves to converge on the Jabberwalker, who's actually roaring out pleas of no and stop, which is very unsettling. But I don't think she killed the beast though. We know in the trailer that the Jabberwalker will make an appearance again at some point, and if anything, it might be Neo wanting to make the monster submit to her. I mean, think about it. She's probably had enough of being the second fiddle to someone else, and now she wants to be the one in charge calling the shots, which, if the intro is any indication, she'll probably come to enjoy quite a lot. At least we now know where those shadow people come from, and this once more seems to set up future appearances of Neo's parents and Roman if her power continues to evolve on her emotions. For now though, the thought of Neo having the control of the Jabberwalker and an army full of copies of her already dangerous self to command makes her quite the dangerous prospect, that I'm buzzing to see what effects it will have on the story moving forward. But what a fun episode this was! The volume continues to make some great steps forward into exploring this bonkers world and the deeper analysis that it can offer to the characters for some fascinating moments of rewarding on the surface elements and some deeper analysis that will have impacts, I'm sure, later on. It was a clever approach as well to have this episode be the girls facing a rather nerve-wracking battle of their perseverance so soon after being introduced to the early chapters of their emotional struggles they'll face this volume, especially Ruby, who I was really glad to see not go totally within her own shell despite the painful way the previous episode had ended. We've only just begun seeing her heart get shaken up by her misery and see that start to rise above her brighter emotions. So it's only logical the negative cloud forming in her head is there, but it's not totally able to sway over her, allowing her then to still offer up some grounds for new light-hearted laughs, the spark that creates new challenges that will push her deeper into her eventual breaking point, and moments of small victories that will only make the previously mentioned highlight have an even bigger impact on the viewer, knowing that Ruby has fought hard, but unlike this time, it ain't gonna be enough. The chess game then was a brilliant early doors mental and physical roadblock meant to give Ruby that avenue to gain enough hope to keep willing herself forward in spite of her increased pain, but also have the heroes still lose, to balance that upkeep of hope with a stronger influx of pain, so progress is gained, but not at the cost of forgetting what the main goal of this volume is, putting Ruby to the grindstone no matter the brief moments of joy she's able to muster. And the prince was a colourful outlet for this conflict to stem from. A more proactive introduction to how this world is going to test the characters, where Jinxie was more thematic, with the little princess's boisterous attitude finding that right even level of being just an absolute pest, but still being someone that has uncontrollable temper that makes them feel like a decent threat, which also helps him thankfully avoid coming close, but just avoiding that annoying level of brattiness that will make any scene he's in a groaner, that I would want over faster just to see less of him. Though, of course, one of the biggest highlights of this episode was the fight scene. For the first large-scale multi-person fight of this nature in some time actually, the RWBY did a phenomenal job of finding plenty of ways to have each sequence flow together nice and smooth, like one big connected thread of events, something which has famously marred past fights on this scale, so that is definitely a blessing to see. And of course it doesn't hurt as well that it's topped by these sequences often being some of the series' most jaw-dropping to watch. Seriously, Winged Weiss and Dragon Slayer Yang are already up there for some of the best iconic visuals in the entire series, so much love there. And while small so far, our time with both the Curious Cat and Neo has certainly left us with plenty to think on, making for some great closing chapter hooks, with enough in the episode's weight to make it feel like their debut moments already have quite the impression. Though for me I think the actual star of this episode is just straight up the visuals. The Crimson Castle is the best setting in the volume so far, with incredible animation, directing work, and a sense of life that really helps elevate how much Ever After feels like a character of its own. It's the biggest sign yet of how hard the task was for the RWBY to nail such a strange, unnatural stage for all of this volume, but damn did it make for a killer showcase of just some top drawer visual design and life. And now for the first time this volume, I want to include a small segment called The Little Details, for all the tiny elements that I love from this episode that I did want to give some praise to, but I just found no place for it in the rest of the review. So, let's go. Weiss's eye twitch during the prince's rude rant to her. Yang, Blake and Little all being spooked by him dashing towards Weiss, and Little's advice also to carry favour with the brat actually working. In fact, Little's cheering, and heck, Little in general is just always going to be a little delight. And there's also that shot of them getting petted by Weiss. Then there's also the light rippling when the prince steps out into the void, and finally, the first and what I'm sure will be many ways that we see Curious's corporeal form lead to some creative scene transitions. And finally, we cap off with the episode awards, beginning with the scene of the episode, which, big shock, is the chess fight. So much fun, so creative, easily among the series' best large-scale fights, and yeah, just so much to enjoy from that in terms of the visual and the actual spectacle of it all. Character of the episode? I'm gonna give it to the Red Prince. The main cast was solid as ever, and Curious has already made quite the cool debut moment, but I do really want to praise how well the show was able to make this runt of a royal be a fun source of abrasive comedy, and also a decent early door threat without going too far to the point of becoming a scene killer. A lot of that is also thanks to the winner of the voice acting gold star, Michael Maconian, who I thought was on top form, capturing that right amount of pompous, prideful, and pitiful energy that never strayed far into aggravating, which isn't an easy thing to achieve with such a character. And that's my thoughts on this episode. Another banger that was more so carried by its strong characters than the emotional thread that helped me make last episode feel like a 5-star classic, but it's still a thrill ride with plenty to enjoy, whether you're here for the initial highs or the winners finding some deeper elements in the losses that laid out for some really interesting thought pieces. So far, 3 out of 3 episodes in this volume have been an absolute delight, which I hope is a sign that this volume will indeed truly be one to remember. But what about you guys? Did you enjoy this episode like I did? What are your thoughts on the Prince or Curious? How do you feel about Neo being the wild card? And what was your highlight of the chess fight? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on all my social medias at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.